Alright, let's see how this works. Hello everybody. Welcome to the first of my video lectures that I'm making for the semester. In them, I'll be covering material, sort of walking you through it. We're also, as I said before, we left for the break, we'll be using discussion boards, short homework assignments, that kind of thing in order to kind of simulate a sort of classroom type pace and environment at least. But you're at least going to get me talking, probably even more so than was in class, although maybe a bit easier to digest since it's in video format. So hopefully the fact that these are recorded is also an advantage to you in that you can just go back and listen to the things that I said, hold me to promises I make, that kind of thing. So what I wanted to do, starting off today, since I wanted to more or less keep to the schedule that we had for the semester, was I wanted to go over one of the samples. And I've put that up on Canvas, as a matter of fact. But before I did that, I wanted to go back and... Actually, hold on, let me just change my mic levels real quick so I'm not blowing out people's ears. Before I did that, I wanted to go over the prompt again, because we went over it towards the end of class, and it's been a really, really long week, at least for me. It was a very necessary week in terms of the break, but all the same, I'm assuming maybe some people might have might use a refresher at the very least. So let me go through it again, but just really, really simply, because I want to just hit the main points on here. Using those to talk about what the sample is doing, because obviously we didn't start out any of the other units just talking about samples at first, so I want to just use this sample to get us initiated into thinking about some of the things that we need to do for the paper. So let's talk about those. So here are the learning and writing goals. Basically what you're going to need to do is, for Unit 3, is convince your stakeholder of something in particular relating to your issue that you've chosen all semester long. You're going to need to tailor it effectively to them, and part of that tailoring is using stasis theory to a certain extent. So here are the requirements. You need to offer an argument that persuades a particular stakeholder to change their position on the issue, incorporate relevant primary or secondary research to support those arguments, and be effectively organized around an appropriate argumentative form for your attended audience and goals. Now, part of that appropriate argumentative form is it's partially the forms of argument that we had discussed earlier in class, towards the very beginning of class. We had some readings over that, as a matter of fact. But it also includes things like stasis theory. So your use of stasis theory in paper 2 is going to provide the backbone of that tailoring to a certain extent. So what I mean by that is you identified a particular level that seemed to be really important about your issue. I want you to use that as a jumping off point for your own argument. So for instance, if you found that in discussions about your issue most people disagreed about policy, you should be focusing your energy on making a policy argument to your particular stakeholder. If you found that most of the disagreements seem to be happening around definition or quality or even on the fact of the matter, it would be important to use those. Now, that's something that you can rely on if you, for instance, don't have or can't get a tremendous amount of more information about your stakeholder. So what we're going to be doing this week is, or later on in the week in a video, is learning how to examine stakeholders more particularly. So doing more research on that individual or that organization or whoever you're targeting as a stakeholder there. It's important to note that they might have a particular level of stasis of disagreement with you that is earlier on, even before, for instance, some of your other stakeholders in your Unit 2 paper. So you might have to change that level of stasis between your Unit 2 and Unit 3 paper. Just keep that in mind. So it needs to have an appropriate argumentative form. That includes stasis theory, that includes like the proper like capital F forms of arguments that the book discussed. It also includes some rhetorical gestures too. I'll be talking about those next week, but just to sort of preview, I mean things like ethos, pathos, and logos. And I'll be discussing those with a colleague, as a matter of fact, next, well, I won't say exactly which day, probably on Monday, but all the same, I'll have a discussion about that up for you to listen to in a sort of podcast-like format that's very short. So this is what's required by prompt 3. In addition, you need to like use MLA citation. It needs to be the same length as Unit 2, and you need to like organize and edit it. And we'll be doing, like, as the course goes on, as you turn in your Project 3, you're going to get assigned peer review partners. So everybody has to turn in some form of Unit 3 rough draft in order for peer review to work properly. It has trouble, for instance, if you turn it in late, assigning peer review partners for you. So if you turn it in late, you're not going to get adequate feedback. You're going to get my feedback, obviously, but you won't get like stuff that other people might see in your paper that they can point out. So it's really important that you get that in on time. That's just a little quirk of Canvas I want to mention there. All right, so this is basically what we need to do for Unit 3. Now let's look at an example of somebody that did that, basically. So this is a paper from another class. It's not my class. It's somebody else's student wrote this. But all the same, it's a very excellent paper, and so I'd like to use this as an example. And there are some things, obviously, that the student could do better. And it's like this for every paper, as a matter of fact. So we'll point those out as we go along, too. But what I want to do is run through it real quick for you. Okay, so this paper is about the NFL and the issue of its high rates of CTE, which, as the paper describes, stands for chronic traumatic encephalopathy, caused by like lots of concussions, let's say. That's one of the leading causes. So I think this paper is a good example of how it has both tailored evidence as well as a thoughtful attention to the things that matter within the issue, and maybe even outside of the issue, to the stakeholder. Things that are important to the stakeholder, motivations, stakeholder motivation. So, as I will talk about next week, this paper uses a good combination of ethos, pathos, and logos throughout to pretty good effect. Though I will say, in terms of like just structure, it might have had, or it could have used better transitions between some of the sections. So there, to me, are clear sections to this paper that could benefit from like transitions like in and out of. So like here ends a section about some anecdotes. And it moves into some statistics. Then it moves from that into financials. And so it does that very, very stiffly. Like there's no differentiation between like this and this. It could use some lead in, is what I'm saying, basically. So other than that, I think this is a good paper. So in the end, this paper makes a couple moves as part of its persuasive argument. It establishes the issue, defines it, and then evaluates it. All of these like implicitly and explicitly. So it like we know the facts of the matter, or like it's assuming for its stakeholder these levels of stasis: fact, definition, and quality. The topic of question, that's CTE. Here's how it's defined. It's talking about it a little bit more, what that exists of, using an example to help define that. It's obviously saying it's bad, and it knows that players probably think that CTE is bad. It's certainly not good. And so what this paper is doing then at certain points, it's making a policy argument. And so you can see that explicitly right here, for instance. So you can tell with certain vocabulary. So it says here, I suggest that you should cut your football career short by playing only through your rookie contracts and then retiring. That is a policy that it's making, or a procedure, like a very explicit one. And then it offers some rationale. The amount of money you make in your rookie contract sets you up for life. It is in your best long-term interest to take your money and start a new career. Any football career longer than that increases your risk of CTE drastically. So it offers a policy and then explains it. And then it goes into greater detail, like with more and different types of evidence after that. So this paper is focused on policy. And I think that that's a pretty good one to do, especially since I think between the speaker in this paper and the players, I can see that they probably could agree at the other levels of fact and definition and quality before leading up to that, at least as it is written. So I think that's a good level for this. So the first thing that is really helpful here is the evidence that it uses. Multiple examples here are given from players. So we have John Hilton here, a former player for the Washington Redskins. We have the example of Terry Long, Jovan Belcher, Dave Duerson, Junior Seau, even Andre Waters. All of these are good examples. It also gives another example of Troy Polamalu talking about concussions as well. And so, in addition to the other like studies and things like that he uses, this like source from Rayleigh to find some stats, likewise from Butterfield at Boston University. That stuff's nice, but I think its use of players as evidence, and more importantly as authorities, thinking again about ethos in particular, I think that this paper does a good job, and it's really astute, because people in sports often look up to the veterans in their sports as authorities on said sport, at the very least. So this seems to me like a shrewd use of ethos in the paper, and I think that is a really good consideration of their particular stakeholder and the types of evidence that they would be most likely to respond to. The other part that I wanted to point out about this paper in particular is that it considers the parts of the issue and sports that are important for incoming players in particular. So it's talking to like players as a whole. It doesn't really like differentiate them like from the outset, but it's also talking to, in particular, you can tell by the language here, it's talking to incoming players too, or prospective players. So it talks about how you should only play through your rookie contract. Well, obviously, like, we might infer that veteran players should probably get out while the getting's good right now then, but it's also making a suggestion for those rookie players in particular. So for many people, just thinking about like an incoming player to the NFL, for many people it's possible that, like, since this is their career, they've been spending their whole life for preparing for since that can get ended in one bad move during a game, there exists this mentality that you have to get in and get as much money as possible because that situation is so precarious. But what this paper does is a decent job for making the case that you only need so much money in order to both survive, or like have a good balance of surviving the league as well as making enough to have a good life. So it talks about that in this financial aspect right here. So if a player would invest the $2 million in the stock market and get an average return over the next 30 years, they would have $30 million by the time they were in their mid-50s. That would allow them to live a nice life by the time they really wanted to retire. So this paper is making the case to players, but especially incoming players, that they could have a nice life and get out of the league both quickly and with a minimal percentage or like of occurrences of CTE or something like that. I'm not phrasing that very well, but you understand what I'm saying here. What this paper is doing with that is it's doing a good job of taking the stakeholders' motivations into account. It's really thinking about why they are going into the league in the first place, given that it's so dangerous. It's because there's a lot of money there, and it's because they've been training. This is what their job is. This is what they've been spending their whole life doing and preparing for. And so one of the reasons people do that, obviously, is because they want some level of security in their life, some stability, and in order to get that, they use it's obviously worth thinking about, like, money. Money is an issue. Financials are an issue, and so I think bringing that up in this paper is a really good move. So, as I said, this paper isn't perfect. It has some like structural issues. I would say like these paragraphs, for instance, are like a little short. And as I was saying, the transitions between like this section and this section, as well as like from this to this, that could use a little work. But especially with those short paragraphs here, it might be a structural issue. But it is perfectly fine to me because it's not in the form of a traditional academic essay per se. Remember, your argument needs to have a chosen form that you believe best suited to your stakeholder, and so different rules can apply in terms of what that structure looks like. So it's okay, for instance, that some of them are short because this is direct address. You're writing, if you were, for instance, writing a letter to a particular person, what paragraphs look like, how you write things, that can vary wildly. And so maybe in writing to NFL players, this student felt that maybe they wanted to keep the facts and figures section like relatively short here. And so they had like 3 different sets of things, but they wanted to have that in there but not emphasize it as much as other aspects. And so I think that that's totally fine. So you're going to want to have a balance of that. I want you to really think about what kind of structure you would like. Really consider it deeply, because that's going to determine quite a bit about what you need to do for your paper. Later on in the week, we're going to talk more about how to do that sort of tailoring to your particular stakeholder. But even in just talking about this sample, we can see that the author did research, or at least thought a lot about why, or like what challenges players are facing, what they have to think about, what their interests are, what their motivations are, what their desires and fears are, and it used those to really basically it tailored the argument. It used those to determine for the author what kinds of evidence that they used, basically. So that helped determine that, for instance, these should be a little shorter, and that the more pathos and ethos-driven evidence should be emphasized, for instance. And so that's something to think about. All right. So this video is going to be part of a discussion post. This first one isn't graded, it's just a dry run, but in the future I'll be asking a question at the end of these videos, or giving you an associated writing prompt for them that you'll then answer on the discussion board. So that's where the collaborative aspect of the class comes in, where the daily aspect of it comes in, because I still want to give us stuff to do on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday to have that sort of somewhat rigorous schedule. Though to be honest, we could probably do this, do like 2 assignments a week or something like that too. I'm considering how we're going to continue like doing the class and like what format that's going to be in. But for this week at least, on Wednesday you have a short writing assignment that you have to turn in, and that you could have been working on before today, in fact. I put it up in the middle of last week or thereabouts, but obviously if you're on vacation, that's understandable. But what I want you to do is write a letter to your stakeholder. So in doing so, I want you to use, for this assignment, direct address. I want you to format it that way. So I want you to write it as though you were sending a letter. I want you to briefly attempt to persuade them regarding some facet of your issue for the semester, that you've been going going through the whole semester long. More detailed specifications are available on the assignment itself. I will be looking at these and grading them, obviously, but I won't be really I won't be coming down too hard on them, but I want you to take it seriously nonetheless. So look at those specifications. It's really just I think a page and a half to 2 pages or something like that. Just go by what the specifications on the assignment say, the details. So later on in the week, I will be posting another video talking about different aspects of analyzing stakeholders. So I'm going to give an example of how I do research and walk through my rationale for thinking about that, so you can see my process there and at least how I do it. And we sort of talked about doing that, sort of reverse engineering it through this sample, but I'll be going through and brainstorming myself, sort of visually, or at least textually, in that video. So there's also an associated assignment that's due on Friday nights. That is, I want you to settle on a kind of form of argument for your stakeholder, and I want you to talk also in that if that's not on there yet, about what kinds of evidence you think you might want. So I'll explain more about that in the video itself, but that's to explain that assignment. Next week, we are covering material associated with tailoring our arguments to the stakeholder, so things like concessions and counter-arguments, and ethos, pathos, and logos. This week, we're identifying important stuff about the stakeholder that we need to know before moving forward with that tailoring. And next week, we're using that information to better craft our particular arguments to them. All right, so I hope that this video was useful to you. I hope it didn't go on too long, but I obviously had to make a lot of, like, say, announcements in the video too, so the rest of these will probably be a little bit shorter, but the production value will likely go up as the semester goes along. I'll just say that. And I'll try to make fewer usages of and it's very hard listening to yourself, listening back to this kind of thing. But I really like doing video lectures. I like having recordings for people to go back through. So I hope that this is useful to you.